Our video is going to cover zero exponents and later on negative exponents. The zero exponent section we've already kind of talked about. I've given you kind of the freebie of the year. So I'm just going to kind of go over it again and kind of show you where it might come into play. So again, any number to the zero power is 1. Any rational number to the zero power is always going to be 1. So some examples here, I have a 4 to the 0 power, gives me 1. I have a negative 12, but not parentheses, to the 0 power, so the power is not affecting the negative, so we look at it as what's the opposite of 12 to the 0 power? Well, the negative would just come with us, and 12 to the 0 power is 1. Inside parentheses, again, we have an even number because we consider 0 to be an even number. So it is affected by the power, so we have a negative 7 to the 0 power. Now becomes a positive 1. So these are kind of the key ones as you go through it. Where you're going to see it a little bit differently is kind of some of the problems that we did already this last few assignments. We have 2 squared times 7 times 8 to the 0 power. When I take care of my powers, I'm going to take this and square it, give me 4, 7 comes down, and then I have the 8 to the 0 power, which again is just 1. Because I'm multiplying all the way across, anything times 1 is itself, so I really don't even need that. So I have 4 times 7, which gives me the answer of 28. My last example, a little bit larger problem. Some of the stuff that we've already done. Again, cube root of 27 is 3. This 3 squared is 9. And then we have 27 times 3, but that's to the 0 power. Well, anything inside that is affected by the power, so all of this just becomes 1. You don't even have to multiply this out because of that outside of the parentheses. So in this case we're adding, so we do have to include the 1 on this problem. So 3 plus 9 is 12, and we bring in the 1 plus 1 gives you 13. So I'll give you another examples and doing some more work with that one. But again, we've already kind of covered some of this to get you going on here. Our next section is probably the hardest and kind of the most confusing at times with what we're doing, and that's the negative exponents. So what I thought I'd do is give you some templates. Things that you can just plug in numbers for wherever you see the A. And this will work every single time. So template 1, we have A to the negative 1 power. Well, if we change it to make it a positive, because we always want to deal with positive powers, we're going to flip it or take the reciprocal. Or if I give you A to the negative 3 power, we're going to bring that along, flip it over, and we're going to have the power of 3. So a negative power represents a number that's less than 1. So you have fractions. Okay, so it's less than 1 that you're dealing with. Template 2, we deal with it already in a fractional form, but we have a negative power. So again, we're going to flip it over, and any whole number over 1 is just a whole number, so we don't need the 1. In this case, A to the 1 power, which is this. So our power now turns positive. So in this case, we have 1A over negative 3. We're going to flip it over, and we would just have A to the 3rd power. The key thing to remember on this is the negative power, you are doing the reciprocal of the number or fraction. So if you're given a number, you're going to get it into a fraction. If you're given a fraction with the negative power, you're going to end up with a whole number, or in a case of a rational number. The last template gets a little bit more involved because now we start throwing negatives in front of the rational number, or the letter in this case. So here we have a negative, A to the negative 1. We're going to kind of forget about this for a minute. Again, we're looking for the opposite of this. So we would again do the reciprocal. The negative here stays out in front. And that is going to go into this part. So this would be our look until we solve it. And we'll do some of those. We have 1 over, again, negative A to the 3rd, negative 3rd power. So anytime we see a negative power, we're going to be reciprocaling it. So equals a negative, the negatives stay. The negative here changes to a positive once we do the reciprocal of that. So the key in here is the number or the negative in front isn't affected by the negative power. Only the negative power gets changed once you do the reciprocal. So there's a lot of little things in here that you need to keep straight. So here's 3 templates. I've got one more for you, And let's take a look at that one. Our last template that we're going to give you is template number 4. Now I've got two negatives in front, but now I'm dealing with parentheses. So again, and I have a negative power. So anytime I see this, the first thing I'm going to do is take all of this and reciprocal. Because really this is over 1 and I can flip it. Now I have this. Again, the two negatives in front stay there until we get going with the actual solving of the problem. This is just to clean it up to make it a positive power. The bottom one, same thing. I have 1 over, and in this case I have a negative 2 power. Does not matter. I'm going to flip it over. Now I have it as a negative times a negative a to the positive 2 power. So again, the key thing is keep the negative signs that are attached to the number. Those stay. The power is what changes to a positive when you reciprocal it. Again, there's a lot of little things in here. Make sure that you keep these out as you're working on them and the 3 other templates. So let's look at some examples. Here we go. So I have 3 to the negative third. Our first step is we have a negative power. We're going to reciprocal it. So I have 1 over 3 to the third. The power is now positive. Now I take care of what that is. So 3 cubed is 27. It's under 1. So that's my second step, is taking care of the powers. Same here. I have 2 to the negative 2 power. First step, I'm going to flip it. So now I have a fraction, 2 squared. Again, the power is now positive. Now I'm going to take care of the second step and actually solve the power. Third example, I'm starting with a fraction, but it's now a negative power here. I'm going to flip it. So I'm going to have now a 4 cubed, which in that case is 64. So take these in steps as you go. These work a little bit easier if you go them horizontally. Last example is 1 over 9 to the negative 2 power. Again, first step, reciprocal. Anytime I see a negative power, and then I'm going to take the power into what it tells me to do. In this case, gives me 81. Some more interesting problems that you're going to get into that will challenge you a little bit more. Again, negative and negative out front. So again, I'm working through the templates through these examples. So here's the next, this would be the last template I believe I gave you. So again, anytime I see a negative power, I'm going to reciprocal. Everything comes with it. The only thing that changes is the positive to make this a positive 2 power. Second step is I'm going to simplify inside and actually do what the power tells me to do. So I'm going to take a negative base to an even power. Again, we're bringing that back from a later section. This negative still stays outside. Now I'm going to take care of and simplify. So the section that we're just coming off of, simplifying signs in front of our number, if we have 2 signs, will give us a negative 25. Or we can write the negative out in front of the fractional bar and still have the same answer. Our second example, we're going to start as a fraction. So we have a negative out in front, a negative 3 to the negative 3 power. So again, negative power tells us in the first step we're going to reciprocal. We're going to get this here. This is to the power of 3. I have 2 negatives here. My second step is I'm going to take a negative base to an odd power, because this is the power of 3. Got a little wiped out there. That gives me a negative 27. This negative just comes along with it. So my third step is I'm going to simplify my signs. 2 negatives make a positive, so I have a positive 27 with the sign, or I can just write it as positive, or just 27, it's positive. Other ones that you're going to run into are some of the word problems. And it says, first, write the expression in exponential form. So our problem down here is 7 over t times t times t. So we have to write this in exponential form. So our first step that we're going to do is write it like this. So I have 7 over t to the third power. So what we do here then is our second step is we're going to write the equivalent expression with a negative exponent. So our second step is whatever's on the bottom, we're going to bring up, reciprocal it, and we're going to be multiplying it by the 7. So it's going to be 7 times our t, but now that we reciprocaled it, we're going to have a negative 3 to it. And this would be our answer. But the only thing we're bringing up is what's on the bottom. That's it, and it's multiplied to what's on top. So be careful with those. few more examples. We're going a little bit bigger, and we're going to bring in back in the zero power part of this. So you're given an expression. You're given the numbers for that expression. We're going to input our numbers into the expression. We have here 3. We should have had parentheses. My fault. But make sure you have parentheses here. 3 to the negative 2 power. And then I have this all to the 0 power. So again, if you remember some of the things we talked about in the earlier sections, this is going to be 3. This, I have a negative power, so I'm going to reciprocal. It gives me 1 over 3 squared. Then I have this. If I just multiplied it so you can see the fact that I did what's inside the parentheses first. But if I recognize that it's to the 0 power, I could just jump down to this step. I didn't need to multiply and get 81. Now I simplify it, so this one doesn't have anything to work with. I still have to take my 3 and square it. It gives me 1/9. I add my 1 to it. So the easiest way to do this is add your whole numbers and then bring your fraction down into your answer. Be very careful that you're showing your steps and be very neat with this. You will get a lot of little things in there that you're going to have to take care of. Our last little example is where we're going to take it and turn it into a fraction and then a decimal. So we're going to write 10 to the negative 3 as a fraction and then as a decimal. So we're going to take our 10 to the negative 3. First step again, we reciprocal. So here's our reciprocal part. Then we're going to cube it for our second one to get our fraction. So that takes care of this step. Then we're going to take the third step and we're going to turn it into a decimal. So 1 over 1,000 would be, we're going to move this 3 places to the left and get me a decimal. Because again, if I'm dividing by 1,000, I'm going to move it left 3 places because there's 3 zeros in there. So again, this is where we start putting a lot of the things together into the videos, into the examples, into the problems that we're doing. If you're trying to memorize this, you will get lost. There's just too much stuff to know. Please use your notes because it's the right thing to do. Oh, and also ask some questions on this stuff.